tell you a little bit about how I got started and where I am now. I have 4 kids. Our youngest 3 we adopted. They're all adults now, except my youngest is 17. But our youngest 3 had some education issues. So I got in about 20 years ago or so, just trying to advocate for our twin boys. We adopted them from Bulgaria. They have something called fetal alcohol syndrome. And so I kind of dove into the education system for them and just started seeing things that, you know, were upsetting to me, and seeing things that weren't right. And I'm a right fighter. I'm not afraid to fight. I grew up in New Jersey until I was in middle school, so I've got just enough New Jersey in me to not be afraid to speak my mind. But that morphed into later on Common Core. We all remember when Common Core came out in 2010, and I was living in West Palm Beach at the time, down in Florida, and we had a great tea party there, and a lot of people were active in trying to get, you know, Common Core quashed, and you know, we were successful in the news. I don't know that that really turned into success in the long run, but they changed the name of it in most places, and here we are today with CRT and DEI and every other acronym out there trying to ruin our children and indoctrinate our children in the things that normally, you know, we don't want to see as Christian conservatives. I was so glad when I first saw a Moms for Liberty interview on TV, and that was back in 2021. It's always been hard to engage, especially young mothers, because they have soccer games, they have cheer, they have football. This is not something that's comfortable. They want the idyllic childhood that they had recreated for their children, and unfortunately that's just not the world we're living in today. I think we can all agree that things have changed dramatically. You know, in the past, I've seen between my 27-year-old and my 17-year-old, it's a different country as far as education is concerned. So when I first saw somebody in 2021 with Moms for Liberty, I said, oh my gosh, I gotta jump in. You know, this is great, you know, find some people and jump in, and it happened to be, you know, during COVID. So it was fairly easy to have a big first meeting. My mentor and the first speaker at my first Moms for Liberty meeting, you all may know Pat Dougherty. She's kind of my hero, and she's over there tonight, so I was thrilled that she came tonight. But and she was my first speaker. We basically, in Oconee County, they did not mask our children. They shut down the schools for about a month at the beginning, and then masks were optional. So we were very fortunate, but I have to say in some ways we were unfortunate, because that kind of gave the impression that everybody in Oconee County was safe and the schools were great and there was no problem. But we still have social emotional learning. We still have a lot of other things that are damaging to our children. And I have never, I was an activist in Tennessee, I was an activist in Florida, and here, and I have never seen less willing elected officials to work with the people, their voters, their constituency. It's been very, it's been an unfortunate realization to me. So, you know, I love Houston Gaines. I like Marcus as a person, and, you know, Bill Cowsert, but they don't want to hear from us. They typically don't want to hear from Moms for Liberty. It hasn't been a friendly audience to us. So I would love for you all to reach out to them and say, hey, we heard Moms for Liberty speak, and we're all in, and you know, we want you to work with them and get on board. That would be very helpful. I ran for school board shortly after, well, about a year, maybe a year and a half after I started the Moms for Liberty chapter. I ran for Board of Education there in Oconee County. I got the most votes in the primary, and then it went into a runoff with Ryan Hammock, who eventually won. But I had become such a target that the Democrats actually campaigned and raised money for my opponent, because of the open primary system in Georgia. So that's another thing. We got to close the primaries in Georgia if we want to elect conservatives. So I hope everybody voted on the ballot in the primary to move forward trying to close the election here, close the primaries here. After I lost that race, I kind of just needed to take some time and lick my wounds for a little bit. It was a lot. And so I did, and then shortly after that, I don't know if you're familiar with the name Emily Drabinski, but she is the new president, or last year's president, of the American Library Association. And she's an open Marxist lesbian and wrote a paper called Queering the Catalog. So that has been, her agenda has been to desensitize children to her lifestyle, not just a Marxist lifestyle, but an LGBTQ lifestyle. We have LGB, lesbian, gays, and bisexuals, who by and large are not necessarily on board with the TQ+, TQIA+++. So there is a little bit of a distinction there. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But when that started, there were, again, Pat Doherty and CRW, which became Conservatives of Northeast Georgia, now CNG, started looking at library books in the public library. It actually was not a Moms for Liberty endeavor in the beginning. They strictly deal with school libraries. They've morphed into public libraries now, but before they were just in school libraries. And a few people contacted me last June when the Oconee County Library was having pride events for children and book displays that were very disturbing and pride related, LGBTQ book displays for children. They read a book by RuPaul, a drag queen story hour, not with a drag queen, but about a drag queen. But people started reaching out to me. CNG had already started looking at some of the books, and so we kind of got together and decided that a group of us would reach out and try and get people to speak at the library Board of Trustees meeting. Oconee County Library is part of the same library system as Clark County. There are 11 libraries in that system: Oglethorpe, Clark, Oconee, and a few others in the surrounding counties. So we are all basically part of Athens Regional Library System. And so several of us spoke at the meeting last year. It was almost, maybe even a year ago today. Might have been, July 10th, whatever that was. But we spoke at a library Board of Trustees meeting. A word had gotten out that Moms for Liberty, they love to throw daggers at me, and I make myself a fairly easy target. Word had gotten out that Moms for Liberty was going to be there. A lot of people showed up. I mean, there were probably 100 people there. Did anybody show up at that meeting? Anybody else? Pat was there. It was a little overwhelming. And the people that were there, there was a book called Flamer, and it's what they call a graphic novel. It was in the teen section. But they call, based on ALA requirements or suggestions, they call the teen section the young adult section. So that's very Marxist, really, to try and separate families, from their kids. That's a part of it, to try and make them feel like adults and feel like they don't need families involved in their decision-making process at a very young age. And there's also a gay teen club at the Oconee County Library, in addition to this book that was being reconsidered. So there were several things that people were showing up to speak out against and ask the library trustee board to kind of rein it in and remember that they're children and shelve books in the appropriate section. Nobody has ever, you'll read everywhere that, Moms for Liberty and, You know, anybody else that's speaking out against a book is asking to ban books. That's their language. Somebody mentioned earlier about changing, you know, words. I think that was Kalki, about, you know, changing the dictionary, but nobody's asked to ban anything. It has always been asking to move a book to the appropriate, age-appropriate section. And this particular book that was up for reconsideration that evening, Flamer, the graphic novel, had very graphic depictions of young boys, a boy who was contemplating homosexuality, and I'm not even going to get into some of the content of the book, it's so obscene. But just know that the language alone, even without regard to the pictures, should have precluded this book from being in a children's section, or a teen section at all. And the Board of Trustees actually voted unanimously to move the book to the adult section, which is what we wanted. So, you know, we were successful there. When I got up to speak, there were people there who just knew me and knew who I was and were there to antagonize, so to speak. As soon as I came in and sat down, a person came up behind me with a beard and a dress on, and of course a big fat mask over their face, and a sign that said "Joy is all ages." Not "Joy is for all ages," but "Joy is all ages," which I think is significantly different. And to me, it speaks of the sexualization of children, which is what we're trying to fight against. This person, you know, of course, when I was speaking, I made a statement. I said that LGBTQ plus means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer, and the plus goes on to be inclusive of pedophiles. And the minute I said that, the room just went crazy, and everybody was yelling at me and telling me how wrong I was and jeering at me. But that is what I said. However, in the news reports that ensued, and the attacks against my real estate license that ensued, they said that I said that LGBTQ plus means that everybody in the LGBTQ community are pedophiles, not that it's inclusive of pedophiles. And if you're familiar with what's going on, like in California and other places, trying to sexualize children, they now call it minor attracted persons, or MAPS. So they're masquerading it. They're trying to change the words around again. But there is a movement that believes that they are a sexuality, and that they should be treated with kid gloves. They've changed some legislation in California, actually, to prove that point. The day after my speaking out last July, and I'm a real estate agent. I have been for 20 years. But my broker at the time started getting emails and text messages from people in the LGBTQ community, largely in Athens. And just to let you know, take a little segue here, but just to let you know, the groups that have been showing, I did a deep dive on Facebook to see who is putting dog whistles out there, so to speak, asking people to show up at these library board meetings to protect these books and keep them in the library. The groups that have been showing up are Athens Pride and Queer Collective, the Athens Pagan Society, and another, it's a school, it's a trans and queer school in Clark County called Our Resilient Community, and they actually, it's run by a trans person, and he uses children in these protests. So has the, that's part of their education is volunteering and community involvement. So they'll bring them. And those are the people that want to keep these books in the libraries for our children. So, that's very telling. But these people started reaching out to my broker and told my broker that I was a homophobe and a transphobe, and that I said that everybody in the LGBTQ community were pedophiles and that he needed to let me go. He promptly reached out to me and said that he agrees with everything that I'm saying. I sent him my speech. I said, that is not what I said. I'll send you my whole speech. He said, I agree with everything you're doing and what you're saying. However, I have to protect my business. So you're gonna have to move your license. And that's the second time. I was also attacked back over the mask stuff back a couple of years ago and had to move my license from that brokerage as well. So he said, I'm gonna give you time to try and find a new broker, because in the state of Georgia, most states you have to have a qualifying broker in order to do real estate, regardless of how long you've been in. And so I started searching, and then a couple weeks later, I received an ethics complaint that was filed against me by the trans woman with the beard, trans man. I don't know how as a woman pretending to be a man. So anyway, she filed an ethics complaint against me with the Georgia Association of Realtors. We abide by the Code of Ethics for the Association of Realtors. A couple years ago, they added a caveat for hate speech. Okay, so anybody who works as a member of an organization, be very careful about that. I knew the minute they added that a couple years ago, I thought, boy, it's only a matter of time, They're saying I can either be a realtor or I can speak out for children, but I can't be both. And so that never sat well with me from the very beginning. Once I received the ethics complaint, my broker received a copy of it as well, and he called me and he said, you've got to go now. And so I found a wonder. I don't know if y'all know Mike Grace. He's a wonderful Christian man and a mortgage lender, and he heard what was going on. He called me and he said, you call this guy David Steele out in Winder, and he's got your back. We've got you. And I'll start crying. So he did, and I told him, I'm going to go ahead and get my broker's license because, so I don't have to go through this again. And so my broker's not dragged through the mud. People have asked me if I plan to sue my broker. I would fight for his right to be able to hire and fire me. Okay, it's important to know that they have that right. We should protect. Do I wish he had a backbone? Of course I do. But employers should have a right to employ or hire, under contract those people that they want to support. So, like I said, I wish he had a backbone. Anyway, after I got the ethics complaint, and mind you, there was video of my speech, so they knew exactly what I said. The ethics complaint said that I said that everybody in the LGBTQ plus community were pedophiles. It's not what I said. It's on video, but it's not what I said. But the Association of Realtors moved forward with it anyway. They should have stopped it there, but they didn't. They moved forward. So I reached out to an organization called Coalition for Liberty in North Carolina, founded by a guy named Doug Turpin, who just is pushing back against cancel culture. And they immediately said, we've got you, this isn't right, this has to stop, if you want our representation, we'll represent you. So they funded my attorney, a wonderful former federal prosecutor, who fights for First Amendment rights now. And we lost with the Georgia Association of Realtors ethics complaint. They said, even though clearly I didn't say what I said, it wasn't a good thing to say. It hurt somebody's feelings. So we ended up appealing it. Coalition for Liberty. We had 6 witnesses. Pat was one of them. We had 6 witnesses. It was a 4-hour ethics committee hearing. That clearly, like I said, they said I didn't say what I said, but they still found me in violation of our code of ethics. I guess because I almost said it. I don't know. Anyway, just one word different kind of made a big difference. But we appealed it. So back in January, we met again with the Georgia Association of Realtors. Again, Jonathan Vogel was my attorney, funded by Coalition for Liberty, and we won on appeal. So we won on appeal. However, there were things said in that appeal hearing that were absolutely mind-blowing, and it's where we are in this country today, even in little Oconee County, how they're trying to cancel us and shut us down if you don't go along with their narrative and their beliefs. And those things were, 3 of the things were, the first was that whether what I said, and this is, I'm not going to attribute this to the Association of Realtors. This was one person, and he happened to be the chairperson of the original ethics committee that found me in violation. So he was also at the appeal hearing and a part of it. And he said that whether what I said was factual or not did not matter. If it had the capacity to hurt feelings, it was hate speech, and it hurt feelings. Second thing he said was that the context in which I said it didn't matter. The fact that I had shown up at a library board of trustees meeting in the county in which I live to speak out to protect children didn't matter. I could be shouting slurs and epithets from the street corner at the LGBTQ community, and that was as offensive and as much hate speech as what I did showing up at a library board of trustees meeting. The last thing that he said was probably the most disturbing, and my attorney at the time, he had told me so many times, because I wear my heart on my face, you know what I'm thinking, and he had told me, don't pan face, don't let them know, so I was, white knuckling it, really tried so hard. And he's, a master of it. This was via Zoom call, by the way. That's how they do the hearings. The last thing that he said was that pedophiles are a protected class.
Oh my gosh.
It's a sexuality, and is a protected class. And so I was in violation because I had said something like that. And of course, I showed how I felt about that on my face, but my attorney was just like, and he had to interject and said, I can assure you as a former federal prosecutor that it is it is a crime, sexual crimes against children are a thing, and pedophiles are not protected by the same, protections. So anyway, we won that on appeal, and then after that, we just decided, that some of those things that were said just really needed to be aired out, and that people need to understand what we're dealing with, even here in Georgia, across the country. And so we decided we were going to fight back. So a couple weeks ago, we filed a lawsuit against the Athens Pride and Queer Collective. Fiona Felix Bell, who was the trans person standing behind me, who, and I failed to mention that Mutual Aid Athens, if you're familiar with them, they act like they're some kind of philanthropic organization. However, they're affiliated with Antifa. When you join their Facebook group, Mutual Aid Athens, it says we're affiliated with IGD, which is itsgoingdown.org, which is Antifa affiliated. So, and this person who filed the ethics complaint against me is affiliated with them and runs the Facebook group for that organization. So, and they also show up at the library board of trustee meetings. So anyway, we filed a lawsuit against her, and then we also filed a lawsuit against or named them all in the same lawsuit with Danielle Bonanno, who is a trans man that was the president of Athens Pride and Queer Collective. And so those three were named in the lawsuit. I can't get into the legalities of it, it's a little over my head, but tortious interference with contract, libel, and I can't remember what the other thing is. But so we filed that about 2 weeks ago, and are moving forward. I received word just before I came here that Fiona Bell, by the way, who is on your police oversight committee as well, the mutual aid Athens person, but that she was served today. So she's gotten notice, so we're going to start this move forward. Shortly after the news story came out of the lawsuit being filed, I did an interview with Daily Signal. They sent it out, WND picked it up as well. So it's been out there at a national level, you know, a little bit, but shortly after that, I started getting, can't even tell you what was in the text messages in bed. Text messages, messages on Facebook, and the police got involved. So, and I've been doxxed, my address and home. The text messages were acting like they were in my home and had a screenshot of a bird's eye view of my home. So, you know, they're very upset at me. But we called the police, so they're working on that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Facebook group Oconee County 411, but that's actually a group that I started when I moved here. I've lived here about 6 years, and kind of started at for messaging. That's a whole other thing, but it's got 20,000 people in it, and Facebook shut it down. There's no violations, but they shut it down. So there are people within Facebook as well that you know, want people canceled. So, but that's where we are today. I'm still with Moms for Liberty. I am trying to, I started homeschooling my youngest child a couple years ago, so I really don't have access to what they're doing in the schools so much. So I'm trying to find somebody else to take over the chairship at Moms for Liberty Oconee County. So if anybody knows anybody, please have them reach out to me.